Well, hi there, this is Chandra Eston from Star Astrology Healing, Living in Light. I'm here to talk about, been moving through the signs of the zodiac, and we're up to Virgo, the sixth sign of the zodiac, and the sun moves into Virgo on or about the 21st of August every year and stays there until on or about the 20th of September. And when the sun transits through Virgo, as it does every year, there is a certain flavour, there are certain lessons, there's certain seasons that go with it. And what I'm doing in this series of talks is talking broadly about the individual signs. Yes, so let's talk about Virgo. Some say she is the oldest sign of the zodiac. Got a very strong connection to ancient Egypt, to the Sphinx, known as the sign of the mother god, or the material world, or matter, veiling spirit. And so therefore, a feminine sign, one of the earth signs of the zodiac, and connected to a variety of the divine mothers, whether that's Lady Mary, Lady Isis, a Demeter, Eve. Basically we're talking about a triple goddess here, an ancient goddess, feminine holiness that is encased in matter. So you can't really separate the sign of Virgo from nature, because indeed you could say Gaia is a wonderful example and probably the epitome of the sign of Virgo. When you look at the sign of Virgo, it looks like the letter M, a triple glyph, very similar to Scorpio, except that the Scorpio glyph ends with the arrow pointing upwards, and the Virgo glyph ends with the sort of tail tucked under, so to speak. The rulers of Virgo is traditionally known to be ruled by the sign of by the planet Mercury. That's on the exoteric level. So for ordinary world and ordinary matter, it's to do with the material world and material transactions and the to and fro of commerce, you might say. But on an esoteric level, Virgo is ruled by the moon, which veils Vulcan. And the moon has a far more sort of astral, we might think of it as a fourth ray component, and Vulcan is the sacred planet of the first ray of divine will. Yes, so we have a variety of combination of energies associated with Virgo. And then, of course, I'm very inclined to think that the planetoid Chiron also is a ruler of the sign of Virgo, because remembering that Mercury governs Gemini and Virgo, but Chiron, which was found in the late 70s, 1977, has got a great deal to do with health and healing and bringing of spirit into matter. And so to my mind, Chiron is in its rulership in the sign of Virgo. Virgo is one of the signs on the common or the mutable cross. So we have the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. That's one polarity or one arm of the mutable cross. And the other arm is Virgo and Pisces. And the signs of Gemini, Sag, Virgo and Pisces have a great deal to do with ordinary people and ordinary life and ordinary communication, and a great deal to do with the material world and money and food, and Virgo in particular has a great deal to do with health. And you could say one of the key words, key notes for Virgo is purification. It is penultimately a sign of purification. Yes. There are many attributes that are the best of the sign of Virgo, and really you have to say that tolerance is fairly high up there, because the downside of Virgo is to analyse and to examine microscopically all the details and to dissect and pull things apart, and often when we do that we end up with judgment, and so the opposite of that is tolerance. It's also to do with compassion, so that we recognise our failings, the best and the worst in us, and we don't judge but we accept. And also you could say charity. because charity is, Virgo's got a great deal to do with service and to finding our place in the world and our vocational service in the world and focusing upon our work, whatever it is, and keeping our attitudes or our judgments to ourselves about other people's place in the world or what their service is or how well or not well they're living their life. Yes, Virgo's associated, remembering that we're following on from the sign of Leo, and we have a great breakthrough, the potential for great breakthrough in the spiritual path when the sun's moving through Leo. And therefore what happens is that we have birthed within the individual, by the time we get to the sign of Virgo, this latent soul potential, known in some of the texts and the teachings. Esoteric Astrology is the best book by Alice Bailey that will explain to you the specifics of this most ancient and mysterious and wondrous science. So the essence of Virgo, of this connection to soul and spirit, is referred to as often as latent Christ consciousness. And this is the Christ in me and the Christ in you, and the best and the holiest and the most divine aspect of ourselves. But the key word there really is latent, because being an earth sign, we have to purify the physical body. We have to work very hard to bring a latency into fruition. And the signs that go between the sign of Virgo and the sign of Pisces, so going through Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius and Pisces, we're going from latency to embodiment, so to speak, of the Christ within, of the soul within, of the compassion within. In Esoteric Astrology, and also in the teaching book on the Labours of Hercules that explores the spiritual lessons underpinning the sign of Virgo, we have the Tibetan's keywords, and he says that the keynote for ordinary people living and experiencing the sign of Virgo is let matter reign. And I guess what that means to me is that we think that the physical world, the material world, the sensory world is all there is. We're unaware of the latency within the form. We're unaware of the sentience within a rock or within an animal or within a mountain or within anyone but us. We're blind to the fact that spirit exists, and therefore matter reigns. However, once we've evolved through the signs of the zodiac, and we evolve initially what we do for goodness knows how many lifetimes, tens of thousands probably, as we go backwards through the zodiac. So instead of going Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, we're going the other way: Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Taurus, Aries. But at some point we reverse the wheel. And the wheel is generally reversed when the signs of Leo and Scorpio are prominent. And from that point on, we become aware of ourselves and we begin to live as soul and spirit. And we are known, therefore, once the wheel has been reversed, then we've moved from the ordinary worlds of matter, ordinary humanity. We've moved through the intelligentsia. We've moved through the lifetimes of spiritual aspiration, and we've become a spiritual disciple. And from that point on, the keynote for Virgo, the voice emerges from the Mother God herself. And the voice, and she says, I am the mother and the child. I God, I matter am. So there's the voice of the Holy Mothers, the Earth Mother, Triple Goddess, reminding us that we are both the mother, birthing our own consciousness, and the child, young in the ways of spirit, and yet we are also God. We have innate within us our immortal selves. And our immortal selves can only really come to full fruition when the best that we can be of our spiritual selves is interpenetrated and enacted and has purified and vivified the physical body, the matter that we are. So we can't separate our physical selves from our spiritual selves. They are intrinsically merged and at one in the sign of Virgo. And through this keynote, then we are reminded that we have the power within us to radiate love, to radiate compassion, to radiate tolerance, charity, kindness, all of those wonderful qualities. Yes, so it's a very interesting sign of the zodiac. However, I guess you'd have to say that Virgo also tends to have extremes. So she's known often as the goddess of virtue and vice. When I was learning astrology, some long time ago, I remember coming across a phrase to do with the nuns and the prostitutes, and that's just a phrase that kind of points out the extremities of our relationship with the feminine sexuality, because sexuality is not meant to be either prostituted, whether we're a man or a woman, and nor is it meant to be repressed and squashed down and denied and negated. As for a couple of thousand years, anyone who took the cloister, anyone who lived in the a cloistered incarnation, cloistered life, was meant to repress their sexuality. And we can see here in the modern world what this has done to those people who've been trying to follow a religious or a spiritual life, and yet somehow or other have had to do that in a way of burying their sexuality. It erupts in very strange ways that are harmful to children, harmful to the individuals, harmful to institutions. And really, there's meant to be a natural acceptance of the fact that we are both physical and spiritual, that it is possible to be a sexual being and also to have a spiritual orientation, and that we don't have to jump and swing wildly between virtue and vice. And many people who have the Virgo planet strong, and that could be the moon, it could be the sun, it could be the past life point, it could be Mars, could be Venus, could be the ascendant, could be Saturn. But if the energy of Virgo is strong somewhere in your chart, then there's a challenge to be able to find a middle point where we revere the sexual, the spiritual, the physical, and we don't swing wildly between one and the other. Yes, because the sign of Virgo is about shielding and nurturing and allowing this sort of revelatory birthing of the inner realms, rather than the sort of war between our male and our feminine selves, or a war between men and women. Yes, okay. I'm going to go on now. Before I talk a little, I plan on talking about the labour of Hercules as it relates to the sign of Virgo, but before I do that, I think I might look at some of the constellations that are connected to Virgo. Yes, and so the primary constellations are Coma Berenice, the mother of the form, also the Centaur, which is the half man, half animal, which represents this need to merge our masculine and feminine selves, and to my mind brings in that rulership with Chiron, because the symbol for Chiron is the Centaur. And then also Bootes, this is another of the constellations, which is known for holding promise of the future. Now, Virgo is a cup-shaped constellation. You could say a grail-like constellation. So, there were centuries worth of myth of search for the Holy Grail. And maybe we're thinking that the Holy Grail is outside of us, and maybe the Holy Grail is within us, and we have to find the holiness, the reverence of the Grail within our hearts, within our wombs, within our sexuality. Yeah. The brightest star in the sign of Virgo is Spica at 22 degrees, I think, Libra. And Spica is associated with an ear of corn. And so we have to nurture, we have to care for the earth, and then when we care for the earth cares for us. And of course this is what all Indigenous people know and what they're taught from a very young age, and we in the West tend to have forgotten the fact that we are the guardians and the caretakers of the earth, and that when we do this, then the earth provides bounty. And so, you know, we have great problems this time here in the 21st century. We have places in drought, we have excess fire, we have excess flood. You know, the balance on earth is clearly unsettled. And I would say that's because we have failed to revere the earth as our mother. So Virgo teaches us that spirit is matter at its highest vibration. I think it was Madame Blavatsky in possibly The Secret Doctrine, where this teaching is that matter and spirit are the same. You know, spirit is matter at its highest vibration, and matter is simply spirit at its lowest vibration. And what we think is, well, we think that there's the earth, and then we think there's the heavens, and we think they're separate and different. But in fact, they're two sides of the same coin. They are a polarity. And it's the Tibetan who teaches us that when we misuse matter, when we misuse the earth, when we misuse the feminine, that this is great harm against Father, Mother, God. Yes, and so the learning of the reverence of the feminine, the sacred feminine within you, whether you're a man or a woman, if you have a lot of Virgo, the teaching is about a sacred reverence for the feminine and a healthy balance between the masculine and the feminine within yourself. Yes, and eventually what happens in the sign of Virgo is that the soul gains greater capacity to influence the personality through the body, so that the desire nature of the physical body doesn't overtake and overshadow the soul. And the soul's task in the sign of Virgo is to gradually rise, like the rising dawn, the light of the sun at dawn, to overtake the personal self. And so one of the best ways to do this is to pay attention to the food that you eat, and the rhythms that you live within, and the disciplines that you have. So, you know, exercise and sleep and food, these are ways that the soul gains control of the physical elementals, because left to our own devices, the physical elementals in our physical bodies would like to run wild, like the animal side of the centaur. Yes, okay. I think I might leave that for the moment. The labour of Hercules. So labour, the sixth great gate, that's what the sign of Virgo is referred to as, and the labour or the spiritual test for Hercules, the aspirant who becomes the disciple, is entitled Seizing the Girdle of Hippolyte. That's Hippolyte. And I'll just read you something about this labour as it's written in Esoteric Astrology and the Labours of Hercules. And the great presiding one called unto him the teacher watching over Hercules, and said that the time is drawing near. And he asks, how fares the Son of Man who is the Son of God? Is he prepared to venture forth again and try metal with the foe of a different sort? Because each one of the signs of the zodiac has a different test and a different foe. Can he now pass the sixth great gate? And the teacher answered, yes. He was assured within himself that when the word went forth, the disciple would arise. So we really can't rest on our laurels. There's always a new test or a new training as we move forward through the signs of the zodiac. The disciple would arise to labours new, and this he told the great presiding one within the council chamber of the Lord. And then the word went forth, arise, O Hercules, and pass the sixth great gate. Another word likewise went forth, though not to Hercules, but unto those who dwelt upon the shores of the great sea. They listened and they heard. Now the sea astrologically is associated with the sign of Pisces, that is the opposite sign of the zodiac. Now upon these shores dwelt the great queen who reigned over all the women of the then known world. Remember, we're talking here from Greek mythology, so this is women of the known world. You could say it's around the Mediterranean. They were her vassals and her warriors bold, and within her realm of men not one was found. So this is a women's civilization, a women's kingdom, or a queendom, I suppose. Is that a word? Only the women gathered round their queen, and within the temple of the moon they daily worshipped. So there's the worshipping the feminine energy, but the moon is also the personal energy and the personality. And there they sacrificed to Mars, the god of war. Doesn't sound like they're... I'm not sure what they're sacrificing there. Are they sacrificing men, represented by Mars, the god of war? Back from their annual visits to the haunts of men they came, and within the temple precincts they awaited word from Hippolyte, their queen, who stood upon the steps of the high altar, wearing the girdle that had been given her by Venus, the queen of love. Okay, now that's the first indication we have of the girdle, which indicates really that the task is something to do with the feminine self and possibly the sexual self. This girdle was a symbol of unity achieved through struggle, conflict, strife, but also a symbol of motherhood and the sacred child to whom all human life is truly turned. So there's the theme of Virgo, is to bring the feminine self through sacredness into harmony and alignment with the higher self, the spiritual self. Now, one of the ways we do this and we seek the union with the divine is through intimacy and through sexuality. Now, the call's gone out for Hercules to meet a foe unlike previous foes, and similarly the women have also heard the call. Word has gone forth, said she, that on his way there comes a warrior whose name is Hercules, a son of man and yet a son of God, to whom I must give up this girdle which I wear. Shall we obey the word, O Amazons, or shall we fight the word of God? Okay, so this is the society of the Amazons. Now they're known to be the warriors, the warrior women, and they're debating, should they surrender the feminine to Hercules, or should they fight? Will they be engaged in a battle between the sexes, or will they try and find a middle ground? And as they listened to her words and as they pondered o'er the problem, again a word came forth saying that he was there ahead of time, and he was waiting without to seize the sacred girdle of the fighting queen. Okay, so Hercules is just coming in to take the sacred girdle, the sacred femininity, while the women are trying to decide, should they fight to keep it or should they surrender it? Is this the eternal struggle that's been going on between men and women for the last few thousand years? Sounds like it. And forth to the Son of God, who was likewise a son of man, and there's that theme of he is both human and divine, went Hippolyte, the warrior queen, and he fought and struggled with her and listened not to the fair words she strove to speak. He wrenched the girdle from her only to find her hands held out and offering him the gift, offering the symbol of unity and love, of sacrifice and faith. Yet grasping it, he slaughtered her, killing the one who cowered him with that which he required. And as he stood beside the dying queen, aghast at that which he had done, he heard his teacher speak. So this is a fairly disastrous rendition of what is a spiritual test. The spiritual test is for Hercules, the son of God, who is also a son of man, to meet the sacred feminine. And there was no negotiation. He's taken it and killed the queen in the process. And I suppose you could say this is what's happened between men and women. You know, we haven't had fair negotiation, fair words. We've had sacrifice and a duel to the death. And the teacher says, my son, why slay that which is needed, close and dear? Why kill the one you love, the giver of good gifts, custodian of the possible? Why kill the mother of the sacred child? Again, we mark a failure. Again, you have not understood. Redeem this moment ere you seek my face again. So we learn here that this is not an easy test in the sign of Virgo, and that most likely when we try and resolve this conundrum of how to bring spirit and sexuality and physicality and the masculine and feminine to harmony, that most likely we will fail. And we have to try again. Silence fell, and Hercules gathered the girdle to his breast, sought out the homeward way, leaving the women sorrowing, bereft of leadership and love. And unto the shores of the great sea again, and there is the symbol of Pisces, came Hercules. Close to the rocky shore he saw a monster of the deep, holding between his jaws poor Hesione. Her shrieks and sighs rose to high heaven and smote the ears of Hercules, who was lost in regret and knowing not the path he trod. Unto her help he promptly rushed, but rushed too late. She disappeared within the cavernous throat of the sea serpent, that monster of ill fame. But losing sight of self, this son of man, who was the son of God, breasted the waves and reached the monster, who, turning towards the man with swift attack and roaring loud, opened his mouth. How interesting. He's going home, he's got the girdle, he sees a woman in distress. Yeah? And he, without thinking about himself, he rushes towards the throat of the sea serpent. Yeah, so if we fail in our initial attempt to bring harmony between the masculine, the feminine, the mundane, the sexual, the profane and the sacred, we are going to meet a great monster that we will have to fight. But he's fighting selflessly, so surely this is some good deed here. What was I up to? Down the red tunnel of his throat, this is the sea serpent, rushed Hercules in search of Hesione, finding her deep within the belly of the monster. It's a bit like Jonah and the whale, isn't it? And with his left arm he seized her and held her close, while with his trusty sword he hewed his way from out the belly of the serpent into the light of day. And so he rescued her, balancing thus his previous deed of death. For such is life, an act of death, a deed of life. And thus the sons of men who are the sons of God learn wisdom, balance, and the way to walk with God. Well, what a task. A spiritual task is that when we seize things that don't belong to us because we want the material, we want the physical, we want the sexual, and we harm others because of that, we will create karma, and that we will need to redeem this through acts of life, acts of generosity, acts of selflessness, where we put ourselves in harm's way. And thus he learned wisdom and balance. So goodness me, not an easy spiritual test, and how do we relate that to the modern world? Well, of course we can look at all the attempts to redeem. What are they talking about? You know, we've had women's liberation for several decades. We've had the Me Too movement, and we have, we're trying to meet each other in the middle rather than blame and accost and harm and hurt and kill. There's no point talking about toxic masculinity and man-hating. We're trying to, because we all hold within us the masculine and the feminine, the anima and the animus. We hold within us matter and spirit, and we need to try and find a point of balance. And you could easily say that this lesson is associated with our relationship with the earth and the bounty that the earth gives us. Are we raping the earth? Are we using the earth for our own ends? Are we planting trees, or are we just digging coal? Are we polluting the oceans? Are we addressing the balance and the things where we've created harm or death? To the various kingdoms of nature, to the animals, to the vegetables, to the continents, to the oceans, to the men and the women, to the black and the white. Wherever we've created harm and division and hatred, we need to enter into that. This is like approaching the sea monster, and be willing to risk all. And in this way we're going to learn the wisdom and the balance of this holding and revering the light within the earth, the light, the sacredness within the body, the sacredness within masculinity and femininity. And to complete this teaching, from the labour of Hercules, we say, "From out the council chamber of the Lord, the great presiding one looked on, and from his post beside the teacher too looked on. And through the sixth gate again passed Hercules, and seeing this, and seeing both the girdle and the maid, the teacher spoke and said, Labour, the sixth is over. You slaughtered that which cherished you." Because the woman initially, the queen, was offering the feminine, offering the earth, offering. It's a bit sort of Garden of Edenish, isn't it, too? "You slaughtered that which cherished you, and all unknown and all unrecognised gave unto you the needed love and power. And then you recognised that which needed you, and thus again the two are one. Ponder anew the ways of life, reflecting on the ways of death. Go rest, my son." So those themes of life and death are very strong in the sign of Virgo, and Virgo has a great deal to do with fostering life well, and Pisces has a lot to do with death, and the polarity of Virgo and Pisces is everywhere evident in this teaching. Yes, so if you have planets in Virgo, then ponder, how does this relate to you? Are you at war between your physical self and your spiritual self? Is there a war going on between your masculine and your feminine self? Is there a war going on between your impulse to nurture yourself or others versus the tendency to want to use or abuse? And maybe this is a lesson for humanity. We can't continue to use the earth and use and abuse it for our own ends, because nature needs to be balanced. We can't harm and abuse any individual for our own ends. We're seeking to find this middle path where we shield and we nurture and we revere the essence of spirituality which is there within the sign of Virgo. Okay, and remembering, of course, if you have any planets in Virgo and you'd like to know more specifically in terms of what they mean for you, then of course you're welcome to get in touch with Chandra. That's what I do. I work regularly with people, primarily online these days, but if you happen to be in central Victoria, then you may well come and see me. And I can look at your natal chart. I can look at the interpenetration of the physical, the sexual, the spiritual, the financial, the service, all of these things that are intrinsic to this revering of life and the understanding of death. And so, of course, there's so much to learn in these teachings. I hope that's been of use to you. This has been Chandra, and of course from starastrologyhealing.com, Living in Light. And of course you can go backwards, and if you haven't already listened to some of the teachings of the earlier signs of the zodiac, I started with Taurus, and you can make your way through those. Okay, bye for now.